While I was researching Julie's story walking ability, something just clicked for me. Something that could tie everything together. Let me spoil two big secrets from this video just to spark your interest. The first is that I found a connection that proves Victor and Julie knew each other long before Julie arrived in the town. Second, what if the person who told the children the story was Julie? And what if that story was the Chromonocle? There is no denying that Julie will play a significant role in Season 4. I believe she will be the key character in understanding the history of that place. And as the boy in white said, the answers are at the beginning. This is why in today's video we're going to talk about Julie's new ability and what it could mean for the future of From. And let me tell you, we may have already seen this ability change the story, but we just didn't realize it was Julie's doing. The Season 4 trailer has already confirmed that we will see Julie exploring her newfound ability. The synopsis for Episode 4 reads, Julie searches for a way to harness her newfound abilities. I think it's safe to assume that Julie's entire arc this season will revolve around mastering this ability, and that she will succeed by the end. The show's producers have told us that by the end of Season 4, we will understand everything about this place. This makes perfect sense. From is expected to have a total of 5 seasons, so by the end of Season 4, our characters would know everything there is to know, leaving the final season for the ultimate confrontation. Now, I have to be honest, I've always thought that time travel is one of the weakest narrative devices a show can use. Can't explain something properly, just introduce a character from the future and suddenly everything makes sense. But in From, this concept could have some very interesting applications. Let me give you an example where Julie may have story walked without us even noticing. During the scene from the first night at the diner in Season 2, Donna, Kenny, and the others bring everyone inside and threaten them with guns. Of course, people don't believe them about the monsters, so they're uneasy. At one point, Randall manages to capture Kenny and threatens to kill him if they don't open the door. Kenny manages to escape because there's a knock on the window. We expect that knock to come from one of the monsters. We've seen them knock on windows before. But here's the strange part. We only hear a single knock. That's it. No follow-up. This isn't typical behavior. When the monsters are at the windows, they usually speak to the people inside, trying to trick them into opening the door. But this time, there's complete silence. Just one knock, and nothing else. Also, the timing is too convenient. The knock happens at the exact moment Randall is threatening Kenny. People look through the windows and don't see any monsters near the diner, and yet we still hear the knock. After the reveal that Julie can story walk, this scene takes on a completely new meaning. I'm convinced that a future version of Julie was the one knocking. It makes perfect sense. Julie was inside the diner at that moment. She witnessed everything that happened. So I believe that in this new season, we'll see her revisiting that night. And when she sees Randall grabbing Kenny, she instinctively knocks on the window. This would also make her realize the full potential of her ability. When she threw the rope down, she didn't know she had saved Boyd. Boyd never told her. I was stuck in a chimney and a rope suddenly fell. That's how I escaped. So Julie didn't realize she had directly saved his life. But with the diner window moment, she would experience this cause and effect firsthand. I wanted to show you this example to help you understand just how massive the implications of Julie's ability are. She could literally create a web that stretches from the beginning, from the children, all the way to the end of the series. To better understand this, we need to go back to the first episode. The first time we see the Matthews family, Julie is telling Ethan a story about Norman being killed by fairies from the Lake of Tears. I think it's very interesting that this is how the show introduces Julie as a storyteller. Keep that in mind. Later in the show, Julie wants to tell Ethan a new story, but Ethan says he can tell his own. There's no denying that this show is deeply tied to storytelling. We have the Chromonocle, which mirrors everything happening in Fromville. And we have the story the children heard, the one that gave them hope, and ultimately created the tree. Here's an insane theory. The more you think about it, the more sense it makes. What if Julie was the one who told the children the story that gave them hope? And what if that story was the Krummonacle? If this is true, then everything connects. It would also make sense that Julie is the original storyteller. She was introduced through storytelling. Her story reflects everything that has happened, from the sacrificed children to every cycle ending in failure. The reason this keeps happening is because it's Julie's story. Ethan's line, "Now I can tell my own story," might be what changes everything. Until now, Julie has been the narrator, and because of that, the story always ends the same way. But with a new narrator, the story could finally have a different ending, and that's why this cycle might finally succeed. I must admit that I struggled to understand this concept, that Julie couldn't change the story when we literally saw her throw the rope to Boyd. I still have some doubts about it. The problem for me, and the reason I called it a paradox, is that Boyd is the one who saved Julie's life by destroying the music box. And without that rope, Boyd would have died in that chimney. But if Boyd had died in the chimney, then there would be no future Julie to throw the rope. This is my reasoning for why it shouldn't be possible, and for me, it was proof that Julie can actually change the story. Now, here's the counter-argument. The story was always supposed to happen this way. In this version of logic, there is no original timeline where Boyd dies in the chimney. Instead, time in the town functions like a closed loop rather than a straight line. From the moment Boyd was in the chimney, the rope was already waiting in Julie's hands in the future. It isn't that Julie changed the past. It's that her future actions were required for the past to exist in the first place. If you were to look at the town's history in a book, the page where Boyd climbs out and the page where Julie drops the rope would be written at the same time. One cannot exist without the other. Furthermore, if the town is a sentient entity, a kind of dungeon master, it might rely on these loops to maintain its own existence. By trapping Julie in a moment where she must save Boyd so that Boyd can eventually save her, the town creates a perfect, unbreakable cycle of trauma and survival. In this view, Julie didn't break the script. She played her part perfectly. She felt like she was making a choice, but in reality, she was fulfilling a destiny that had already happened. The very fact that Boyd was alive to destroy the music box is proof that Julie was always going to drop that rope. Going back to the Season 4 trailer, we see Julie story-walking after she passes the tower ruins. Based on the fact that the last time she was there with Ethan, she also managed to go back in time, we can safely assume that this place acts as a barrier between different chapters, and that Julie activates her ability by crossing it. It's still unknown exactly how this works, but I think it has something to do with visualization. You need to know what you want to see. If you enter the tower blindly, you might arrive at a random moment in the story, like when Julie ended up in the tunnels with Victor and Tabitha. I think she ended up there because subconsciously, she was worried about her mother, and that's why the tower transported her to a moment where Tabitha was present. This made me think about something else. Before going to the ruins with Ethan, Julie first encountered that place while she was in the woods with Randall. She wanted to explore the ruins then, but Randall stopped her because something felt wrong. Up until that moment, we saw Randall as someone who isn't afraid of anything, someone who would fight anyone. But here, we saw a complete shift. It was the first time Randall was truly scared. He even said please to Julie just to get her to leave. Of course, Julie didn't listen and went to the ruins anyway. But that scene showed us something important. Whatever Julie felt about that place, Randall felt it too. The strange part is that it had opposite effects. For Julie, it seemed to calm her, to quiet the screaming in her head. For Randall, it terrified him. In one of my earlier videos, I had a theory that Julie's ability to storywalk doesn't come from being Tabitha's daughter, but from being chained in the tower. If that's true, then it means Randall and Marielle might have gained abilities as well. The idea that the three of them received something in return for that pain fits perfectly with the logic of From. Everything in that world follows a cause and effect structure. Every action has a reaction. So being tortured, Surviving that pain and escaping death could have unlocked something in each of them. However, I don't think they all have the same ability. I believe we will see 3 different abilities, and they will need to combine them in order to escape. I think this ties into the nursery rhyme. They touch, they break, they steal. They break could represent Randall, his aggressive nature, always starting fights, always destroying things. They steal could point to Marielle, considering her past with stealing drugs. Another reason I believe they have different abilities is because each of them reacts differently after waking up. Julie hears constant screaming. Randall still sees cicadas. We don't yet know what Marielle is dealing with, but it's likely on the same level. So could this mean we'll see 3 new abilities being unlocked? Maybe this theory is a bit of a stretch. So from this point on, let's focus on Julie, because her ability is something we know for sure. Most of you know about the episodes that MGM recommended for rewatch. I've watched those particular episodes multiple times, but I couldn't find any clear connection. That made me believe that the real connection will only be revealed in Season 4. And that connection is that Julie will revisit every episode they recommended. I think this is how we'll learn the true history of that place. We'll witness the ritual through Julie, and it would be wild if she actually becomes a participant in it. This could explain why she told the children a story about everything happening in the town. We saw her at the end of Season 3 trying to save her father from being killed, so in the same way, she might try to save the children. But when we reach that point in the story, Julie will realize that she can't actually change anything. This realization would come from moments like the knock on the window, where she saw her actions had an impact, and from failing to save her father. She would begin to understand the limits of her ability and what Ethan meant when he said, "Once a story is told, it cannot be rewritten." That's why Julie won't try to save the children, because she knows she would fail. But she also knows that the children once heard a story that gave them hope. So instead, she chooses to become the storyteller, the one who shapes the events of Fromville. This would tie everything together: Julie's story-walking ability, the chromonocle, and the idea that Julie might be connected to the original children whose parents refused the ritual. One popular theory, which I completely agree with, is that Martin knew Julie because he met her in the past. A future version of Julie may have arrived in the town when Martin was still a resident. It was extremely strange how Martin seemed to know about Abby, yet didn't recognize Boyd. It's even more interesting that he asked Boyd, "Do you think Abby was right?" This is one of the biggest questions in the fandom, and I think I might have an answer. We know everything happens in cycles, and I believe Abby could be Martin's reincarnation. I'm not sure whether the cycle preserves gender, but if it doesn't, then Abby being Martin's reincarnation would make sense, especially since both were Marines. If gender does matter, then Martin might instead be a reincarnation of Boyd. The reason I say this is ambiguous is because of what we saw in previous cycles. In this cycle, Jade is the one playing the violin, helping them remember the children. But in the past cycle, it should have been Miranda, not Christopher, playing the violin. After all, it was Miranda's violin that Jade used. Going back to Martin, he told Boyd that he always thought the worst part of that place was the monsters. So here's what I think happened. Julie went back in time and met Martin. She told him everything she knew at that point, which may have influenced his decisions. She might have told him about food in the forest, about other settlements, just like Boyd later explored the forest looking for resources. But Martin didn't know about the melody because Julie didn't know about it. I don't think Boyd ever fully explained how that danger entered the town. People only knew it was somehow his fault. So when Martin went into the forest and heard the melody, he may have thought it was a sign and followed it, only to end up imprisoned. I also forgot to mention something earlier about Julie, Randall, and Marielle. I don't think it was random that Randall was spared. The monsters weren't trying to create fear in that moment. They simply couldn't kill him. I think Randall had already been claimed by a higher entity, On the night Randall kidnapped Donna, they hid in the RV. We saw the monsters approaching the vehicle, and when the melody started, something very strange happened. The monsters suddenly stopped. They froze, almost as if they were afraid. This is later reinforced by Martin, who said that the monsters are only the tip of the spear. Another interesting detail about Julie's story-walking ability, something I haven't seen anyone talk about, is the idea that Victor may have known Julie since he was a child. When Victor was left alone, he might have encountered a future version of Julie while she was story-walking, and they could have spent time together. Their first scene together is more revealing than we initially thought. Victor is the definition of antisocial. He grew up alone in that horrific place, which shaped his behavior. We rarely see him interact with others. Even with Ethan, he refused to speak until Ethan mentioned the boy in white. And yet, despite all of this, Victor talks to Julie without hesitation. He could have easily walked past her and grabbed his peaches, but instead he greets her and says, "I'm gonna take some peaches. Do you mind?" This isn't typical Victor behavior. He usually ignores people, just look at how he treats Jade. But around Julie, he acts differently. He speaks more naturally, he feels safe. He even offers her peaches. Then he asks if she came from one of the two cars and what she thinks it means. Of course, Julie is terrified, and we empathize with her. A creepy man suddenly approaches you in a house full of strangers after you've just been chased by monsters that know your name. Victor's line, "Are you from one of those two cars?" suggests that he doesn't recognize her. But I think Victor did know Julie from when he was a child. He just forgot, in the same way he forgot about his sister, as a way to protect himself. That would explain why he feels comfortable around her. Even if he doesn't consciously remember, his subconscious does. If you're still not convinced, look at their next scene together, when Julie is sleeping and Victor is drawing her. The show cleverly presents this as unsettling, a strange man staring at a young girl and sketching her. It's enough to make anyone uncomfortable, which distracts us from the deeper meaning of the scene. But listen to what Victor says when Julie wakes up. "You know how sometimes you dream and you forget, but then later you start to remember, and you realize it wasn't a dream and that it actually happened? I think I'm starting to remember things I thought were dreams." At first, we didn't pay much attention to this, but now, with everything we know about Victor, this line carries a lot more weight. I believe Julie is the reason Victor starts remembering. She is the trigger that sets everything into motion. We know Victor draws things because he forgets, so when he says he's starting to remember things he thought were dreams, it suggests those dreams were real memories from his childhood. He starts to remember Julie. He starts to remember what actually happened. After this, we see him going through his drawings, and that process helps him recover crucial information. This is why I believe Julie is the key to unlocking Victor's memories. And if you're still not convinced, look at the drawings. Here's the one Victor made of Julie, and here's another one he made as a child, of himself, Miranda, Eloise, and a dark figure. If you compare them closely, don't they look similar? I believe they depict the same person, and that person is Julie. I think Victor drew that second image shortly after his family died. A future version of Julie may have story-walked back to that night and found a young Victor alone, terrified of everything happening around him. Maybe the reason Victor survived for so long is because Julie kept him safe. We know Victor listens. He listened to his mother and didn't follow his sister. In the same way, he would have listened to Julie, which helped him survive. I'm really curious what you think about this theory, because I genuinely believe there's something here. The last thing I want to mention about Julie's story-walking ability is how it might connect to the present timeline. Specifically, the monster she encounters on the first night. The one who tells her, "Don't you remember me, Julie?" I believe that monster was lying, and that moment isn't as important as it seems. Yes, it's possible Julie met him in the past, but I think the main purpose of that scene was to create mystery and show us that the monsters already know the names of the people trapped there. If that particular monster were truly important, we would have seen him again. but he only appears in the first episode. So when you really take a step back and look at everything, it doesn't feel like Julie is breaking the story at all. It feels like she's the one holding it together. Every moment we thought was random, the rope, the knock, Victor starting to remember, even the story that gave the children hope, it all points back to her. Not as someone who changes the outcome, but as someone who makes sure the story can even exist in the first place. And that's what makes this so unsettling, because if Julie is the one connecting all of these moments, then it means everything we've seen has already happened exactly like this before. Every cycle, every failure, every attempt to escape, it was all part of the same story, which makes me think that Season 4 won't be about breaking the loop, but about finally understanding it and realizing that maybe they were never meant to escape, only to play their part.